Defense News is proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this edition of Defense News Weekly, we'll see a huge construction milestone for a new aircraft carrier, find out who wants to buy new F-35s, and look at some aircraft and missiles for the U.S. Navy. With in-depth interviews, up-close video, and leading analysis. This is Defense News Weekly. Welcome to this week's edition of Defense News Weekly. I'm Jeff Martin. We've got a busy show planned this week looking at some key airplanes and weapons that will define naval aviation in the future. In addition, we'll also visit the flight deck of the Navy's next aircraft carrier to see a key construction milestone. But first, here's some headlines. Poland says they've formally asked the United States government for permission to buy 32 F-35 Joint Strike Fighters. They'd use the jets to replace aging Soviet-era Su-22 and MiG-29 aircraft. The move by Poland would make them the first Eastern European country to buy the aircraft, and comes as Poland is upgrading the capability of their entire military. But they still have to be approved by the U.S. in order to even buy the jet. And the Trump administration has rammed through more than $8 billion in weapons sales to Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates, over congressional objection. The administration used an obscure exemption, allowing them to sell in an emergency by citing the ongoing tensions with Iran. The sale is believed to include unmanned aerial vehicles, precision-guided weapons, and maintenance. But the deals and the process that led to them are infuriating congressional Democrats, who are not happy with being circumvented, and they say they'll do what they can to block the deals. And the Pentagon has hit the pause button on a long-troubled effort to redesign the kill vehicle on the ground-based mid-course defense system, also known as GMD. The Pentagon's R&D chief, Dr. Michael Griffin, has decided to issue a stop work order, which effectively kills the program indefinitely. While most agree that the need to design a new vehicle is pressing, how that will be done remains hazy, as the focus of missile defense shifts. Lockheed Martin will not submit a bid to build the Navy's next-generation frigate, as the company says they'll focus more on supplying a combat system and other components to the eventual winner, instead of entering a modified Freedom-class littoral combat ship. The move was first reported by USNI News and cuts down the expected list of competitors to 4. However, the Wisconsin shipyard that builds the Freedom-class is not out of the running for work, as Italian company Fincantieri wants to build their design there if they win. And one big news item this week was President Trump's renewed interest in the catapult system on future American aircraft carriers. Well, the new Gerald Ford class is set to feature the electromagnetic system known as EMALS. The system has had issues in the past, and the president is not shy about his preference for the older steam-based versions. So this week, when speaking to sailors in Japan, he renewed his call for them.
But there's never been anything like the steam catapults. And I went to the Gerald Ford, which is under construction now for a long time. They're having a problem with their electric catapult. And I was talking to the catapult people, and they said, steam. In the meantime, we're spending all that money on electric, and nobody knows what it's going to be like in bad conditions, you understand. So I think I'm going to put an order. When we build a new aircraft carrier, we're going to use steam. I'm going to just put out an order. We're going to use steam.
But while the president wants steam, the Navy is committed to the EMALS system, which the Chief of Naval Operations confirmed this week. In addition, while standing on the deck of the Navy's next aircraft carrier, the Future John F Kennedy, the service's acquisition chief explained why.
So I'm confident on EMALS. Again, we've launched 700 airplanes and recovered them. We've continued all our land-based testing. We'll continue to work with the president and make sure we work closely with him as we move forward.
The reason the Assistant Secretary was on the Kennedy was to watch a huge moment for the ship, the landing of the island. It's a unique naval tradition that makes the ship actually look like a carrier. Here's my report.
As we gather today on the 102nd birthday for the ship's namesake and former President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, we celebrate a tradition that dates back to ancient Rome, when coins were placed in the mast of a ship to ensure safe passage and good luck.
As we are all very well aware, landing the island on the flight deck is a significant event, not just because it gives the ship that unique and unmistakable aircraft carrier profile, but most importantly, this construction milestone brings John F. Kennedy one very important step closer to being commissioned into the fleet. In keeping with naval tradition, I'll be placing my aviator wings under the island as it's lowered to the flight deck, making them permanently part of the ship's structure. As was stated, Tradition promises this will provide good luck and safe passage.
My coin's got two simple words on it, and I would ask you to think about those words every day you're doing something for the ship. It's lethal and agile. Never forget what you're doing every day matters. You are giving the country the lethality it needs to protect us in peace and protect us in war.
And in keeping with naval tradition, I'll also be placing two coins that represent Program Executive Office aircraft carriers under the flight deck. One of them has the motto on it, deliver, maintain, and modernize. And so as I place the coins today, it's my intense hope that the spirit and enthusiasm of all those workers will remain with this ship forever as it continues its great Navy legacy.
So what's really impressive about the construction of the Kennedy right here, achieving this milestone, is we've held to the schedule, a pretty aggressive schedule we put out there, and done so with about 8% less labor costs. A lot of that is because of the new way the shipbuilder is integrating technology. Ms. Boykin talked about super modules, this being an example of putting 588 tons on a ship in one piece that allows us to do it much more efficiently. And it's also showing kind of the power of digital when we do digital design, and we can do the design off the ship. And if you notice how snugly that just sat right down, that's pretty darn impressive.
The Navy and Boeing are hard at work on the first unmanned aerial vehicle to be integrated into an air wing, the MQ-25 Stingray tanker. I recently got a chance to find out what's ahead for the program. Take a look.
So our two key performance parameters, which is a real attribute of the program, the Navy decided, is carrier suitability and aerial refueling. What we see when we get to the next tranche of testing after we've gone through this early phase with the early aircraft is really going after the carrier suitability and the true air-to-air refueling. This phase, aeronautical engineering and burning off the software to take off, be autonomous, and fly.
What's been the biggest challenge you guys have kind of run into on the program so far?
I think the biggest challenge is making sure that we synchronize, right? So we've got the activity going on with our aircraft, we've got the design activity, and then of course making sure that we stay in sync with how the Navy is going to bring it onto the carrier.
And how's the refueling side of it coming? Refueling is not something exactly that's a stranger to Boeing, so it's not
No,
something
not at
you've
all.
never done before.
Absolutely.
But the unmanned side, that's completely different from anything that's ever really been done.
Well, in one respect it is. The great thing is we're leveraging how the Super Hornet today refuels. So that same pod that the Super Hornet is using coming off the carrier today is the same pod we'll be using. So our objective is to take that burden off those combat-coded aircraft, those strike and attack aircraft, and put it into our aircraft. The refueling piece is going to be very similar. So we're using the same pods and we're going to use the same methodology. Now we have to go prove that out, and that's part of our development activity.
How does the integration of that onto? Is it built? Is it a pod that would actually go on the MQ on the aircraft itself, or is it integrated in because it is a design tanker?
It's a pod, and it's going to have to be integrated in so that we can pull gas out of the airplane and push it through the pod. Very similar to how the Super Hornet does today. So that I think was our biggest advantage. We have the knowledge of what we're doing with the Super Hornet. We've got experience with the pod, and our experience with autonomy is all coming together.
Is there going to need to be a detailed certification for working with other aircraft in the air wing, or is it pretty simple to get to work with other aircraft, like say the F-35 as it's coming in, the Ospreys that they're going to be flying, and things like that?
So we're going to start out with Super Hornet. We're going to build. It takes a development activity and progression, but it should be fairly straightforward. And again, that's been done with the F-18 and that same pod, so it should be fairly straightforward.
You're finally wrapping up looking at all that you guys have coming ahead. What are you most excited about? Getting to see this thing in the air finally, or? Well,
in the near term, in 2019, we can't wait to see the airplane flying because that's showing progress and early learning for the Navy. But our real goal is getting carrier air wing capability out there, and that's certainly the Navy's priority. So giving them autonomous aerial refueling off the carrier, that's what we're here for.
To keep up to date with all of our coverage, be sure to visit our Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn pages. Also, be sure to add us on Apple's News app and other platforms for the latest updates. And when we come back, we'll look at a radar hunting missile and hear the reflections of one of the Navy's retired program managers. The Northrop Grumman Advanced Anti-Radiation Guided Missile, or AARGM, is one of the most advanced missiles of its type, but it could be getting a whole lot more lethal. Let's find out some more from the company.
The original missile, the AGM-88B/C, was designed to essentially go after the surface-to-air radars, but there was discovered vulnerabilities over the time, and the Navy wanted to improve on that. So they moved forward with the baseline AARGM, which addresses what we call geospecificity. I call it an electronic dog leash. It allows the missions to be able to be contained, if you will, within a certain area based upon GPS locations that you can actually put into the missile. So the missile won't fly out of that area. Very important from a Kosovo perspective when we were shooting those older missiles, the HARMs, and they would lose track on the radar because the radars would shut down for survivability, and then would coast into other places where they really didn't want it to go. So that really established the first step, if you will, with respect to improvement of that capability through a program called Precision Navigation Upgrade for the HARMs. But the Navy decided about 2/3 of the way through that wasn't good enough. We still want to hit radars that are shut down. So with that, they moved forward with the AARGM program that then brought in an improved ARH, anti-radiation homing capability to be able to detect and find the targets, and then be able to then turn on a millimeter wave radar terminal guidance for when they do shut down, to be able to scan the ground pattern, find returns that look like either the radars, the TELs, or the support equipment, and to be able to guide on those and hit them. So that's the transition from suppression of enemy air defenses, where we get them to turn off the radar, to the destruction or deed of enemy air defenses by actually hitting them and taking out either support equipment or actual radars for that process. So with that, the Navy's matured that concept over about the last 15 years, and then as threats continue to evolve, and this is the history of, if you will, warfare. You start seeing ranges becoming more prevalent because we want to have survivability associated with launch platforms. So
You need to be able to launch from outside that window that they're coming into.
So we don't have to be shot. They can't hit us when we're launching it down. It's really a sanctuary type of an environment to where you're shooting from. The first systems were baselined off the HARM missile, and that technology was back in the late 70s, early 80s, developing and then executing. And back in those days, the concept was really using mid-body wings to be able to maneuver the missile. The reality is it's maneuverable, but it's very inefficient with respect to drag. So what we've done from that AARGM missile to increase range and speed was take those mid-body wings off, go to aft actuators, and really sleek down the overall look of the system. And you've seen the model.
It looks
out there.
completely different.
Very sleek, built for speed. And again, then we've repackaged all of that control section that was in the mid-body of that older missile, moved it forward, reduced the space, and what we've really made room for is more propulsion, because it's all about speed and range to the target. And that whole design is really surrounded around that. So on that, you'll also see some retractable lugs that we have on there. Those retractable lugs are designed to fall down after it's released, primarily to reduce drag, increase speed and range.
The ER version will be able to fit inside the F-35. That's a big deal for you guys.
Specifically designed for that. We recognize it as a market opportunity. If we're going to do a missile, it needs to be able to adapt to future fighters and other types of aircraft. So, absolutely.
So what kind of work have you guys done on ER so far, and what's kind of ahead for the rest of 2019 and into 20?
Well, we're on contract right now with the U.S. Navy for the engineering, manufacturing, development phase. We're continuing to work with that, and then we're looking forward to working with the Air Force as they continue to mature their program. Specifics haven't been released yet to the public, but those President's docs can start leading you to that with confirmation from the Air Force at your leisure.
Fair point. Fair point. So but for the Navy side, specifically for the ER, what are you moving to flight tests later soon, or where are you kind of at with that?
Well, we're in the development phase. So if you take a look at the overall program, it's rocket motors, new actuators. So we're doing a lot of work in that area to be able to improve what I would consider the risk associated with the development program. So that effort's ongoing with all of our subcontractors in those areas, and they're building up even as we speak those subcomponents for validation, testing, and verification. So as that moves forward, we'll continue to meet the Navy's requirement and timeline and schedule, and looking forward to doing our first flight test in the near future. So,
Captain Mark Vandroff was heavily involved in ship design for the Navy for years and recently retired. So in order to reflect on his service, he sat down with naval warfare reporter David Bujold. Here's a portion of the interview.
Captain Mark Vandroff, newly retired. Thank you for joining us.
It feels interesting and good and a little bit strange to be referred to as Captain United States Navy retired for the first time. So.
Indeed. Well, thank you for coming out. So you've had 20 years of experience in the engineering duty officer world and in working on platforms from the DDG, you've worked on FFGX and the requirements for large surface combatant. I wonder if you could start out by just giving us some of the main takeaways that you've had over your career and some of the things that guided you in your last job at Carter Rock.
Carter Rock. So that's great. Just one thing. So the two program offices I worked in were the DDG 51 program twice and the LPD 17 program twice. I never served in the FFGX program, but Carter Rock, while I was in command there, we did provide significant support to the FFGX program, but that was never I was never in the program office, just to be clear. I wouldn't want to claim credit for something I didn't do. So the 20 years of what I learned as an engineering duty officer and in ship acquisition, and there are probably a few key takeaways. The first one is shipbuilding is hard and complicated, and there's just no way around it. If you're going to build a ship, it has so many different competing priorities. And in some cases, those are compatible with difficulty, and in some cases, they're incompatible. In fact, one of the things we did at Carter Rock is a great example of this. We worked with our Coast Guard customers to do some of the modeling and testing and preliminary design for the Polar Icebreaker program. And when you're building the Coast Guard has a tough problem for their ice-breaking requirements because they want to be able to break ice at both poles, which means you need a ship that can transit the Pacific or the Atlantic to get from one pole to the other. The things you would do to design a ship hull form to make it good to hold the seas in an open ocean transit is the exact opposite of what you would do to make it efficient at breaking ice, and they're diametrically opposed. And so you spend a lot of time figuring out what is the best compromise. And then when you make that compromise, that shape of the hull, that size, that starts to drive other trades in machinery alignment, in what other mission packages you can put on it. So takeaway one from being an engineering duty officer and working shipbuilding and ship design for 20 years is ships are hard. And if you see something and you're scratching your head of why is it that way, chances are there's something else on that ship that we had to do it not the way we wanted to in one way so we could get it the way we wanted in something else that the decision was made that was valued more. The second thing that, and this is an old saying, but it's always true in shipbuilding, there is no free lunch. There is no royal road. Everything comes as a price and everything comes as a trade. Anything that you do on a ship, there's an opportunity cost because the space, the weight, the power you use to do X is space, weight, and power you won't have to do Y. And then the third thing about shipbuilding is, and this is something that should be obvious, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised by this, but personal relationships and leadership matter, just like anything else. And I'll specifically say, I think most people would agree that Huntington Ingalls, that their Pascagoula Ingalls facility has really improved over the last few years. And I'm sure they would say that, and I think the Navy would probably say that. And, I'll just to one person, Brian Cushas, an excellent leader. And really good leadership can affect an organization. And really good leadership is critical in shipbuilding, not just good management, not just having the right system and having the right tools and having the right tracking. Those are all critically important too. But having people that really care both about the product and about the people who are making the product is critical. I think it's critical in anything, but it's underappreciated how critical that is in shipbuilding.
As you sort of headed into the civilian world, what's any advice that you would have for people that are coming up in the engineering duty officer world?
So when I was the DDG 51 program manager, I was very honored. My team, which I was part of, was awarded a David Packard Award. And every year, the Department of Defense gives out 2 David Packard Awards for outstanding performance by an acquisition program. And I felt really small and unimportant the year that it was Secretary Panetta presented me the one for our team, because the other acquisition program was a medical program run out of SOCOM that was saving lives on the battlefield right and left. And then it's like, what did you do? Well, we saved some money on a competition, and it was the Navy was happy to have had the money saved, right? We came in under budget, and the colonel that was running the SOCOM program, it's like, he was documenting the hundreds of lives that this new medical equipment that they were fielding into the field for Army Special Forces and Army and now Marine Corps infantry had spread about how so many wounded servicemen were going to live and not die because of what was being fielded. And it's like, oh yeah, you deserve this award way more than me. But you get to talk when you win that award. You get to go to DOU and you give a series of talks. So when I did that, I gave advice to the program managers, then I gave advice to the PEOs and SAEs that were there. And it was similar advice. What I told the program managers is, you won't be successful unless you're passionate about your product. DAU does a wonderful job at teaching process, but only you can be passionate about the thing that you are buying for your warfighter. I remember when I was at DAU going through the executive program manager course, the guy sitting next to me was an Army colonel who was going off to be the Bradley PM, and he loved armor with a passionate. He would go to I didn't know that there was an armor museum down somewhere in Northern Virginia, a museum of Army armor. He knew everything about the history of tanks, just like you and I were talking about. I have a passion for the history of ship design. He loved tanks. He was the right guy to go run the Bradley program. He had the passion in a way that I never could, in the way that I couldn't understand. So I tell PMs, you got to be passionate about your program. And then I told the PEOs and the SAEs that were there, I said, you need to factor passion in when you pick program managers. And I told them, if the program manager you pick doesn't scare you at least a little bit with how crazy dedicated they are to the program, where you're not so sure that they're going to do, that they're not entirely controllable by you, that's the person you want to pick. You want someone who is all about that product and will just do anything to get that product delivered to the warfighter. And that was my advice to leadership, and that was my advice to my peers.
Coming up, we'll look at the next generation of Growler aircraft for the Navy. On this week's Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Carrie Sepulveda offers her latest tips.
Your child did it. They graduated college. Now comes a huge transition period filled with many financial decisions. This is a great time to arm your child with some advice to get them started out on the right foot. Here are 3 tips. First, it's a great rule of thumb to have 3 to 6 months of living expenses set aside in an emergency fund. This does take time, but start building that fund by putting money from each paycheck into a savings account. Don't withdraw from it until you absolutely need to. Once you land your first job out of school, enroll in your employer's 401k or retirement plan. Many employers provide a match of 4 to 6%, so take advantage of that free money. And since the money is being deducted automatically from your paycheck, you are saving for the future without even thinking about it. Pay yourself first. And finally, military members and their families receive education funding through the GI Bill, but if it doesn't cover all of your education needs, you might have a federal or private student loan too. Start paying those down as soon as you can. Many lenders, like Navy Federal, give you a discount on the interest rate if you set up automatic payments. These are just a few tips to get your recent graduate on the road to financial success.
Thanks, Carrie. To get more defense news coverage, be sure to visit our website at defensenews.com and subscribe to our early bird brief, delivered to your inbox every weekday morning to get you ready to start the day. And coming up, we'll look at the next generation of Growler aircraft for the Navy. The EA-18G Growler is the Navy's main electronic warfare aircraft, but it's starting to age. So what will the next generation of Growlers look like? To find out, I asked Boeing. Take a look.
So Block II Growler was kind of, we started talking about it last year, and in 2019 I think is really the solidification year for Growler Block II. We're taking some of the things that were in the Block III, or that are in the Block III, and porting them over to Growler Block II, like the advanced cockpit system as well as the conformal fuel tanks. And then it's about upgrading the electronic attack suite of the Growler. The Growler is the premier electronic attack vehicle for not only the Navy but for DoD. It was designed essentially in the 90s. We've enhanced it along the way, but it's time for a step function change of the Growler, and that's what Growler Block II is all about. At the moment, it's intended to be a retrofit program. Doesn't mean that we're not precluding it from being a new production buy, but initially focused on retrofit for delivery in the 2025 timeframe. Enhancements to the electronic attack suite is really about enhanced sensitivity through all the sensor modernization. It's about adaptive and distributed processing, so being able to take in tons of data with the enhanced sensitivity and be able to distribute that information broadly, and then changing the way the pilot can view that information with the crew vehicle interface and situational awareness. With all this extra information, Growler Block II's got to have more decision aid making to offload the work from the aircrew and allow them to make decisions instead of having to dig through data.
That's all we have time for this week, but if you want to see and read more, be sure to head over to defensenews.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.